access to.
Yeah, you should be good there.
Thanks.
Yep.
Jacob, it's all yours.
Okay. Yeah, so I'm a senior uh, technically back-end engineer, but I've been working in the industry for just close to a decade now. And I used to do a lot of Java, but then I started doing a lot of JavaScript. And now that's all I do is JavaScript. But I still use a lot of command line in my day-to-day duties, like version control, Git and other systems, and updating dependencies using CLI interfaces like for projects like npm and Yarn and Gradle and Maven and other things like that. So nowadays I use IDE. I use the JetBrains IDE, so IntelliJ and other derivatives, and I use Alacrity, which is a terminal emulator. And so yeah, those are the two tools I really use in general every day. So let me share my screen. So Alacrity, I don't know if people are familiar with Alacrity, but it's a GPU accelerated terminal emulator. And if you never heard of Alacrity, I'd recommend you look it up. It's really nice. It's the fastest terminal emulator that I've used. The whole concept of a terminal. So initially there were mainframes, right? And these were time sharing systems, and people would log in with a terminal. So, if you look at a terminal, what it is or what it was just looked like a little desktop computer, but all the processing actually didn't happen on the terminal, happened on the mainframe. And so you would connect via your terminal into the mainframe. And nowadays, people aren't using terminals. They're using laptops and desktops where the actual processing is happening on their computer. So instead of a terminal, people use terminal emulators. And that's just an emulation of a terminal. And there's a lot of different ones out there. On the Mac, you've got the built-in terminal app. There's iTerm. There's tons of other ones, but Alacrity, from my testing, is the fastest. It's written in Rust. So that's what I use. And so I get Alacrity for my terminal emulator. And every terminal emulator is going to have its own configurations. And with Alacrity, there's a file in your home directory /.config/alacrity/alacrity.toml. And that has, it's a key value configurations with different sections. And so you can configure all these different things, such as your font. So your font is very specific to your terminal emulator, the colors in your terminal, the keyboard key bindings, like anything outside of the default keys, you can set up control codes. So in terminals, there was so like on a Mac, there's the control key, there's the option key, command key, shift key, all of these modifier keys in the terminal. They didn't really believe all they had was control. And so like the alt key, I don't think existed as a concept, but so a lot of and the way a terminal responds to these modifiers is it translates the modifier. So like Alt D is going to get translated into this, code. And that code is going to get sent to the terminal emulator and do various things. So anyways, Alacrity has a config file and, terminal app. It doesn't have a config file that you edit directly. You just go into settings and you choose all your configurations in here. So set up all these different key bindings. And in this case, it's setting up the function keys because the function keys, those weren't really part of a terminal or anything. So if you want to use the function keys in a terminal emulator, it's got to send some type of escape code. And the \033, that's octal. The octal for escape. \E or /x1b and hex. So this is function F1 is going to send escape 0p. F2 is going to, send escape 0 or OQ, etc. And then in your terminal emulator, you can, or your programs, you can bind these escape codes to whatever functionality you want. Like, say I wanted F1 key and C shell to trigger something or whatever. So I could bind that escape code to some functionality. But yeah, so every terminal emulator is different look and feel, different functionality. Some like Alacrity. Oh, Alacrity does have tabs now, but it used to not have tabs. You could just open different windows. And your terminal emulators, you can have as many windows as you want. Each one of the windows is like a separate terminal. So say I had 3 windows here, that would be like 3 terminals on my desk and stuff like that. So I don't like to have multiple terminal emulator windows open because there's something called tmux. And tmux is a terminal multiplexer because you can take one window and split it into multiple panes and multiple windows, and you can go easily between them, and you can do all these different things like sending text between the panes and synchronizing the panes and things of that nature. Like I can synchronize the panes so I can send same key bindings to all the different panes like that if you wanted to do that. And so tmux is a program that allows you to get more out of your terminal because you can have different windows and panes and sessions and stuff like that. And every terminal window that you open, there's the concept of a shell, and a shell is the program that you type commands into. Every keystroke gets sent to your shell. And the shell, there's all different types of shells. There's bash, there's C shell, there's corn shell, there's fish shell, there's like Plan 9 RC, there's tons of other ones. There's the original Bourne shell. There was the Thompson shell, I believe. The history of Unix. Unix was developed at AT&T Bell Labs by Ken Thompson and who's the other guy? Ritchie, maybe?
Yeah.
Dennis Ritchie, yeah. And then there was other, AT&T Bell Labs, they had a lot of stuff going on there. It was amazing what they did. But one of their creations was Unix. And they had other creations like, the C language and awk programming language and tons of other stuff. But Unix was originally developed at Bell Labs, and Ken Thompson, who still around, he created the Thompson shell. That was one of the original shells. And then Bourne, I think he was at AT&T Bell Labs, created his own shell. And then the Bash shell was a derivative of the Bourne shell, the Bourne again shell. But so there's been all these different shells that have been created over time. And a lot of the shells, they all port features from one shell to another, because people are like, oh, I can do this in this shell. Why can't I do it in this shell? Oh, another shell I forgot was the C shell, CSH, which a lot of people don't use anymore, but it was a popular shell for some time. And created by Bill Joy, who created part founder of Sun Microsystems, just sold to Oracle, acquired by Oracle. But anyways, so there's all different shells out there, and which shell you use is a matter of preference, really. And you can easily switch shells. You just type in the shell name, and now I'm in Bash, or now I'm in C shell, or now I'm in Corn shell, etc. Or I'm in Z shell, or I'm in the fish shell, whatever shell that you want to use. And the terminal emulator, it always has a configuration for your default shell. So every terminal emulator is different on what the startup command is, but there's always a startup command that gets run, usually your shell. And then you open your terminal emulator, you run your initial command, and now you're in your shell. So I use Z shell, and the reason I use Z shell is because it's backwards compatible with the Bash shell. And so the concept of a shell script is, shells are interpreters. They're command interpreters. So you type in a command line, command. And, a lot of these commands, like pwd, what is that? Well, it's a binary file. It's on your computer. Well, it depends. So in this case, pwd is a binary file, and usually the binary files were written in, C language, compiled, and then stored in various directories, right? And so pwd, it's a compiled file, so it's a binary. In this case, it is on a Mac OS Apple Silicon system, and it has an ARM64 version. That's the Apple Silicon, and it's got an x86-64 version. That was the old Apple. They used to use Intel's. Intel's instruction set. It was AMD's instruction set, E64. So that's why they have two architectures. Anyways, so this is a binary file. It's in this /bin directory. That's the binary /binary. That's what it stands for. But there's also the shell built-in command. And so when you type in things in the command line, everything has a precedence. There's a whole hierarchy of things the shell looks for when you type in a command. There's built-ins, there's commands, there's aliases, there's functions, there's all different things. And so in this case, a shell built-in, that means that the code for pwd is compiled into the shell. In this case, that takes precedence over the binary that's on your solid state drive or whatever, you're in your file hierarchy. So yeah, So every time you type in a command, it's going to go through this whole search, this hierarchy search. And that's how it works. So yeah, and Unix, is an operating system. Well, it's a family of operating systems. Um, and it was all originally, computers were originally all text-based. There was no graphical user interface. Everything was done in the terminal, right? In some type of terminal emulator or terminal. And then over time, graphical interfaces were developed for computers, and that made it easy for people to use computers because they didn't have to type commands in. But computers, a lot of computers, for example, a lot of Linux servers, they run in headless mode where there's no graphical interface. Everything is done still with the terminal. So, anyways, so so now I guess I will talk about some of his advanced techniques and stuff. That's kind of like a background of terminals and Unix. Uh, and oh, I forgot to mention. So shells are an interpreter. So as you type commands in the command line, so the blah 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 blah, all this is going to get interpreted by the shell. Okay, as it's going to get interpreted as a potential command. So in this case, there was no command found for this, but you can also use a shell by interpreting a script, a shell script. And a shell script is just a series of commands listed in a file. That's really all it is until, I can say bash in some file and it's going to go and look at that file and try to interpret it as a series of commands. And that's one of the reasons I like Z shells, because you can run scripts that were written in Bash scripting language in Z shell. Pretty much is backwards compatible, basically. Like the fish shell, for example, has a completely different syntax, so you can't do that. Yeah. So now that's the basics of terminals and terminal emulators and shells and stuff like that, commands. And I use the terminal so much because uh because I do software all the time, and I'm always updating. Like, one thing I do is I update all my work repositories, Git repositories, because I don't like working on old code. Really annoying to me. I work on something and I forgot to pull beforehand, and then it's like, oh, now I got to do all this merge conflict stuff. So I have scripts to go and pull, all the latest and stuff like that, and things to update. I've got like a cache of all my Git repositories and things like that. And I've got a whole bunch of different functionality because like most recent directories that I was in, things like that, because things that I don't like doing manually. And so over time, I started to create my own type of project or repository, or people call it dot files, and on a lot of repos. Sorry, Amazon Alexa just got triggered. uh yeah, that tell it to shut up. So you have to be very careful which words you say around all these voice assistants, or else they will interrupt you. So So anyways, a lot of people, they've got their own .files repo, which is where they, hold all their configurations and stuff like that they use. Because, a lot of the terminal stuff, it gets really personal. Like, oh, I want an alias or a shortcut to do XYZ, something like that to save them time and things like that. So, a lot of that stuff is very specific to what people want to do in their terminal. So then I took that concept and I was like, well, I did all that, but then I was like, oh, well, I created all this functionality I haven't seen anywhere else, so I might as well share it with other people. And then I have it running on all these different computers, so servers, I have my own servers and whatnot, work computers, personal computers and stuff. So then I created a whole installation thing, so I didn't have to manually go in and install all these different things and configure and copy around config files and blah 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 blah. It was really annoying. So I started to create this whole thing, and then that's called it ZPower, ZPWR, because a lot of the Z shell based projects start with the Z because that's, I don't know, convention, I guess. But anyways, so I did all that and I presented on that many times. But one thing to go over is the concept of a plugin manager. And there's a lot of different plugin managers. So for Z Shell, I use a plugin manager called Zinit. And a plugin manager is basically a program, usually written in shell, the shell language, whatever shell you're using, that allows you to install other plugins. Probably the most famous one for Z Shell is Oh My Z Shell. Just plugin manager. I see a lot of people using it. And I used to use it, but it's pretty slow and blah, blah, blah. There's a lot of issues with it, so I stopped using it. But anyways, plugin manager, there's a lot of plugins. People have created a lot of functionality. Like in Z Shell, there's the concept of completions. So any type of completion, like get tab, and you wanted to search through all the get alias, get commands, subcommands, and stuff like that, all the completions, like all the different options, all of that is configured via completions. And I've written a lot of completions for various projects, including like homebrew and stuff like that. The brew command has completions for like brew install and things like that. I helped them with that. So, anyways, so a plugin manager, you can list all these plugins that you want to use in your shell, and then it will go and install the functionality, like the Docker plugin. Okay, Docker plugin, going to go and add all these aliases and stuff, and do some other things, set up the completion for Docker and stuff like that. And so plugin manager allows you to add a ton of different functionality without, recreating the wheel yourself. So I use the init plugin manager, and I really like it because you can load Oh My Z Shell plugins in ZInit, and you can load plugins or you can load functionality lazily, which you can't do in Oh My Z Shell. So Oh My Z Shell, you list all your plugins in your config file, and then it goes and loads them sequentially before you get your shell prompt. So if you have a ton of plugins, then it's like you're waiting around for 10 minutes to get your prompt, which really sucks. So ZInit has a lazy load where it loads the plugin in the background after your shell pops up. So, like you can lazy load. Well, there's lazy loading and then there's late loading. I guess it would be late loading because you load it after your prompt comes up in the background. So it's good. it's good because you can like late load. It's not lazy loading, it's late loading. Late load, various functionality that you're not going to use like a lot, stuff like that. There's all these different configurations you can do with CNIT, and that's what they're demonstrating in this is the ZNet load is like a early load, and the ZNet turbo mode is the late loading, which I talked about, where it basically loads the plugin and your memory after your prompt, which is pretty cool. Because when I open up a terminal emulator, I hate waiting around. Like I don't want to wait around, you know, for a second to get my prompts. I want it to show up as quickly as possible. The startup speed is very important for me. I hate it when I have to wait around, like 30 seconds to get a prompt. It's terrible. So, anyways, that's why I use ZInit, because it has all this functionality that Oh My Z Shell didn't have. And like you can do things like you can list all the plugins that you have for one, and then you can list all the plugins that you've loaded and all the key bindings that they're setting, which is pretty cool. So I'm a Z Shell plugin developer, so I have various plugins, and I can see what key bindings that these plugins are bringing in, which is pretty cool. And what is this? Oh, ZInit report. So that lists all the Z styles. So Z style is a way to configure things. It's a configuration system in Z Shell. And so it lists for every plugin all the different configurations it's bringing in, uh, all the aliases that plugin is bringing in, all the completions the plugin is bringing in. So in Z Shell, when you have an underscore in front of this command, that means that's a function, a shell function that's going to be used for completion. So SBT is scala build tool. So when you do SBT tab, the function that was invoked was underscore SBT. So anyways, ZInit is pretty awesome as far as what it can do. I don't believe that Oh My Z Shell has any of this functionality as far as this reporting and stuff. Trying to remember what else is cool. ZInit. Anyways, yeah, so ZInit, yeah, your plugin manager is an important choice on what you use, because that determines how you load plugins and how you bring in all this, advanced functionality. So, yeah, so ZInit as a plugin manager, then so the tab completions, in Z Shell, that's one of the best things about Z Shell is, all the tab completions, like man tab, and I can search through man pages, and they're separated by functions and all this stuff, all these colors and stuff. And I added all that because I just thought it was, I guess I'm trying to make it look like cyberpunk or something, but neon colors. But anyways, the Z shell completions, that was the underscore man command, and that is, or function rather, and that is part of Z shell. So Z shell, I'm using Z shell 5.9, and this underscore man completion was brought in through the Z shell standard library. So I'm a contributor to Z Shell. I fixed some bugs in there, and I know the repository for Z Shell. So Z Shell is written in C. Like pretty much all shells are written in C. I think fish is written in C++, I believe. But Z Shell is written in C. The code, the interpreter code, and then in the repository for Z Shell, they've got um, in the completion directory, they have all these different completion functions. A lot of them that are specific to the operating system are, in their basic directory. But then you've got base, not completer, core, not core, widget, utility. Where is it? Show command, Unix. Yeah, so Unix command would be like, underscore man would be in there because that's a Unix. Every Unix system is going to have the man command in general. So, uh, so here it is, underscore man. And so whenever you do man space tab, this file, well, it's a file which contains a function that's going to get sourced and run. So the Z shell completion engine is lazy. So basically, there's this keyword in Z shell. It's called autoload. Autoload. And autoload is lazy loading. And so basically, when you say autoload and then you put in some function, and it will register that function in the system. And then whenever you do man tab, now it's going to load. It's going to load that and it's going to execute it basically. And then the completion system will go through, read all this, execute all this, read and execute, and interpret it, right? And interpret all of this, go through, oh, is it a Linux OS? Is it a BSD? Is it FreeBSD? Is it NetBSD? Is it OpenBSD? Is it Solaris? Is it AIX? Because, the Unix family of operating systems has a ton of different ones out there. That's the difficulty of being on a Unix system is, Mac OS is a Unix system. It's called Darwin. And so there might be some configuration in here for Darwin. Well, they have the Darwin directory, which has specific things that are for, Mac OS. Like PB copy. That's specific to Mac OS. It's how you copy onto the clipboard via the command line. So, anyways, the underscore man completion needs to do all this configuration based on the operating system it's running on. Because that's the other difficulty with Unix-based operating systems is every one is slightly different. And so, like PWD, that there's different versions of PWD. So running PWD on Linux, like say you're doing, I don't know, say you're on Manjaro, you run PWD, that's going to be the GNU PWD. But then if you go on to Darwin, Mac OS and you run PWD, that's going to be a different version probably. It's probably going to be the BSD PWD because in the Unix, so the history of Unix was, the East Coast versus the West Coast. There was the AT&T Unix, and then there was the BSD Unix. That was the big split because originally Unix was like, open source, like it wasn't trademarked. And then, so then they were spreading it to all these different universities, like the University of California, Berkeley. And then they developed their own Unix variant called BSD. And Darwin is based off of BSD. Darwin is a BSD based, Unix distro. And So a lot of the commands in Mac OS are the BSD variants, like sed. Sed is the BSD variant that there's, and so like, and grep and stuff like that. And so you have to know which version of the command you're running because they have different options. Like sed on a BSD system has different options than sed on a, you know, on a GNU sed. That's why a lot of times you'll see like a Mac OS, you can install the GNU sed and then you can invoke it as gsed. So, because the Linux-based distros use the GNU software generally. And so on Linux, sed would be the gsed here. That would be the same command. The regular sed that's BSD sed in general. I don't know if this is an alias. Yeah, that was an alias. Well, that was precedence. User bin said on Mac OS is BSD, and then my homebrew one is GNU said. So two different seds and the precedence in your path. So in the terminal, there's a concept called path, and that determines the list of directories that you search for commands. So in this case, my homebrew said came before my Mac OS said, so I ran the homebrew one. But anyways, yeah, so Unix is complicated because there's so many different operating systems. You can go look for the operating system tree, family tree, whatever, and there's a lot of different there's a ton of variation. So when you're trying to be a plugin developer, you're trying to write completions. It doesn't matter what shell you're using. If you're trying to write completions, plugins, and you want it to run on every Unix-based operating system, well, it's going to be harder because look at all these variations. You know, when I write plugins, I mostly make sure it works on Mac OS, and then I make sure it works on major Linux distros, like Ubuntu, all the Red Hat based distros and all the Debian based distros, the major ones. So it's Linux is a Unix based operating system. It's the kernel, right? And there's tons of different Linux distros. There's hundreds or thousands, and every Linux distro is slightly different. So if you're trying to write software that's going to work on tons of different Linux distros and tons of different Unix based operating systems, that's going to be, somewhat tricky. So, yeah, but that's why these completions, they have to do all these checks. What operating system am I running on? Because that's very important to know because of all the different commands, all the different it's commands, it's config file locations, it's yeah, those are the real differences. um because they're all Unix based distros. They all, you can assume you're running the same shell, but the commands that are available, the locations of config files, all of that is highly variable. So you need to know that if you're trying to write completions and stuff like that. Um, so yeah, I mean, if you talk about advanced functionality in the terminal, completions would be a huge part of that functionality. Um, And the reason completions are so good is because, it's very difficult to remember even ls, the ls command. There's different variants of ls and with different options, but for this ls, there's a lot of different options, and it's, difficult to remember slash impossible to remember all the different options. And so you could do man ls, of course, or, there was the info system, because there is the info system and all that. But, having the completions, you do ls space dash tab, and, having that available is very useful. And you can do other functionality, like I could select multiple options like this, things like that. In Z shell, you can do that. You can also have it basically select commands or select options and then filter out based on what you have selected what is still possible. So in this case, you couldn't duplicate the option because it doesn't make sense. So yeah, so my terminal setup, I have 14,000 completions, which is probably the most in the world. I would assume it's the most in the world. I don't know anyone who has, I haven't seen anybody or any other thing that has this many. And a lot of my completions, I have my own repo where I generated. I have programs that go through and parse man page outputs and help. You type a command and then dash dash help or man and a command. So it goes through and it generates all these different completions. So that's how I have that many completions. Like Xyle, whatever Xyle is, I forgot. But yeah, so Z shell completion files. I don't know if people want to go into that, but it's pretty simple. You have in Z shell, you have a compdef, you have a hash compdef Xyle. So that means this completion is the source for the Xyle command. That's what that means. And then it says local. That means this is an identifier that's local to this function or script. And then you have arguments, which is it's an array. And then each item in the array has it has the short and the long option. So in Unix based commands, you have the short and the long options, generally like dash h versus dash dash help, and then you have the description. And so that here's all the different options: dash, func call dash help dash dash version. And then this line says, okay, if I didn't match any of these options for the command, now you're just going to complete all the files. That's what this does. So underscore files is a built-in thing to generate file names. So Xyle, if I do dash tab, so you can see here's all the options. Okay. With the short and the long variants. And then after that, you hit tab and then it's going to complete files. So in my present working directory, it's just going to complete files. That's what that does. In this file name, that's this little tag that shows up here. And star just means everything. Everything after the options is going to be files that you complete on. That's what that means. In Z shell, they call this the op spec or whatever. And then you call a Z shell specific underscore arguments function. And then you pass in the array here. So that's a basic Z shell completion. Very basic. And every completion in Z shell has a corresponding file. And you know, like fish shell is the same. Got well, I believe it has files as well, or it may just be you know, there's different ways to write completions. So in this case, it's just some built-in shell command. But anyways, so yeah, advanced functionality. Well, you know, if we're talking about advanced functionality, that would be talking about a ton of different completions because that's a big part of the shell. Um, aliases are another thing that people really like. So, you know, say you're using Git and you want to do Git status. Well, I can just type GST, right? And the plugin I have, it automatically expands aliases when you hit enter. So git diff head, you know, whatever. Git merge origin master. That's one I own. Git merge upstream master. These are my own aliases. But you know, Docker compose pause, you know, all these different aliases. So I think I have over 2,000 or something. But a lot of these aliases are brought in from plugins that I loaded. You know, like all these Docker aliases. I didn't bring those in. That was from the Docker plugin. Things like that. Docker compose, you know, tons of different Git aliases. The Git aliases are the ones I use the most, like Git cherry pick or whatever, or Git m4, Git. That's a Git alias. What do I use the most? Git pull, DL, Git push, GP. I use this one, GLD, Git log. This one here expands out all this because I don't like typing all that. That's just my own alias. But yeah, I mean, if you can write a lot of aliases, then that will make your life easier. The only problem with aliases is it can be confusing to other people because if they don't have these aliases, they're like, what the heck is GD mean? GD doesn't mean anything. GD, what is GD? Means nothing. Um, but as an alias, it means get diff. So that's why I expand aliases because it doesn't make sense to have GD in your shell history. You would want get diff in your shell history. Um, so yeah, aliases are very, very useful. Questions?
How do you expand the aliases?
Yeah, so I have my own plugin for that. So there's different alias expansion plugins. There's also built-in ways in Z Shell that you can expand aliases. There's different functionality, but I have my own plugin um, because I didn't like how other people were doing it and stuff. So my plugin, it expands the aliases in two ways when you press the spacebar key or when you hit, you know, you accept your line, you hit enter or, you know, carriage return, whatever. And in those two places, you expand the alias. And there's all this different functionality. Like, okay, so underscore, that's the sudo alias. And then here, see, in this position, I would type a command. And I thought, oh, it would be useful to expand aliases there. So if I do sudo gd, well, I want to do sudo get diff. Duh. See? And there was other alias expansions where they didn't allow you to expand after sudo. I was like, well, I just want to do my alias after sudo. That's pretty basic. Or env, or not env, but like some other, you know, x equal to 5, and then I want to run an alias, right?
Yeah.
all I'm saying is X, set X to 5, and now I'm going to run some command. Well, I want to be able to run an alias here too. So let me do that. So that's what I did. And then you can expand like star. Star is a glob. So one of the shell functionalities is globbing. So globbing means you take some symbols and you're going to turn that into a list of files. So star in the terminal means all the files, right? All the non-hidden files, or it could be dot files too. It depends on how you have things configured. But in this case, I want to expand that. So I can actually expand it with tab too, tab or spacebar. And it's going to expand into, actually it's different functionality. When I hit tab, it gives me the dot files. When I hit spacebar, I just get the regular files. So globbing, with the star globbing, it could mean all files, including dot files or not, depending on how you have your shell configured. But yeah, so I have my own alias expansion thing, plugin. And so yeah, aliases are a big deal, especially for Kubernetes. The kubectl, all these different commands. So K8 is kubectl, because K8s is Kubernetes, so K8 is kubectl. But then you can do like kubectl, kubecontrol, whatever. Get pods, get deployments. What are all these aliases? Get dep. Things like that, are nice and nice to have aliases. I believe these are all just from the kubectl command or something, or the plugin. So in my Z shell RC, I have all my plugins listed. So, in plugins, you have the Oh My Z Shell plugins. You can load plugins from GitHub, stuff like that. So I believe I have my own plugin called kubectl aliases, which has all these different Kubernetes aliases. So Meteor aliases, Maven aliases, Nmap, npm aliases. Oh, OpenShift aliases. OpenShift is basically Kubernetes on Red Hat, package Red Hat stuff. I used to use that for UPS. Python, Perl Brew, Spotify aliases, Rails aliases, Rails console, Rails DVC, Rails generate, I think. Probably have that up. Oh no, RG was something else. RG is a command. Rake aliases. Rake is basically like it's like make for Ruby or Rails. Rails this Rails server. Yeah, various aliases, yarn stuff. So a lot of these, like I said, you select plugins of things that you're interested in, and it'll bring in tons of aliases and completions and stuff like that.
How do you prevent conflicts with aliases? So if you
It's precedence.
okay,
Whoever gets loaded latest overwrites the other if there's conflicts. So you have to order them.
you want to
What?
overwrite you just define yours after the plugins are loaded.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so in my Z shell RC, I have like at the very end, I'll load all these plugins, and then at the end, I will do, I will load my own stuff to overwrite things, because like RG, for example, is rip grep. It's like a grep alternative written in Rust. And if I had an alias RG for Rails generate or something, that would be annoying to me because I would want to use RG as my command, not an alias, right? So if somebody defined an alias RG, I would unalias it in my config because I'd be like, that's annoying. Because the precedence order, it's like aliases, then built-ins. I have it written. The shell order of checkings, aliases, then reserve words, then functions, then built-ins, then externals. So if you have an alias RG, that will override any external RG command. So in that case, I would unalias RG in my config after I loaded whatever plugin was causing that conflict. That makes sense?
Yeah, definitely.
Can you
Yeah,
talk a little? I'm sorry, I was just going to ask about one of the tools I've been seeing you use a lot during the demonstration is ZPWR.
yeah, that's my own framework. Yeah. Yeah, so like I said, this is my own dot files type thing where I put in all of my functionality into a repository that I could install with one line into whatever computer I was using. So that's all my functionality is bound up into ZPower. And so I have my own command and uh, I have all my own subcommands. So like I've got, all my versioning and, you know, text art, ASCII art, whatever, and stuff like that. And everything's versioned. And I have all my stuff in my directory. It's in my home directory /.zpower. And in there, it's basically a complete terminal setup. And in here, I have all my scripts that I use, but basic things, and all my Tmux configs, and I have all my tests. So I have a test. I use ZUnit. I've got tests in there. ZUnit is a Z shell testing framework. Here you can write tests, unit tests in Z shell. But yeah. So all that functionality is in ZPower, and you can go in here and look at all the source code for all the stuff. But yeah, so I mean, I've got in here, I've got, see, I'm not really talking about this directly because I've already covered this in other talks, but I have like around 410 different subcommands in here, like regenerating all my caches, because in Z shell you can cache completions. You can build completion caches, which is extremely important for speed. So Z shell, you create a cache, a file that has it's a binary file that has a cache of all the completions, and then the Z shell just scans that on startup, and then it says, "Oh, I found all these completions here, so I'll register them." Blah blah blah. So that's what these ZWC files are. Those are Z shell cache. See all these ZWC files? These are compiled. Well, they call them compiled Z shell word code, I believe, but they're compiled files for faster loading, basically. So, like if you go into my more completions plugin, this is where I have most of my completions that I've generated. You can see this source SRC the ZWC file is 27 megabytes. So in here, I forgot how many files I have in here, but maybe like 8,000 or something in here, 9,000 completions in here. And then all of those get compiled into this ZWC file. And so Z shell just scans this directory. It loads all the ZWCs into its memory. So, and if the ZWCs get too large, it will crash Z shell, by the way. I learned that from experience. So I split up all these ZWC files so it didn't crash Z shell. So anyways, yeah, aliases, Git aliases. Those are like the things I use the most, I think, on my Git aliases.
Do you ever have a hard time finding the right alias, given that you have to find so many?
I don't use 99% of them. So usually I'll just
So if there's
what I'll
one you
do,
haven't used in a while, you might just type it in fully.
yeah, I'll do alias, and then so in Z shell they have global aliases, which means they expand anywhere. So GL expands out to this. That's what's happening there. So a normal alias is only valid in the first position. A global alias is valid anywhere. So GD here is not an alias, a valid alias, because it's not in the command position, but a global alias like this is always valid, by the way. So that's what those global aliases are. But anyways, I do alias JL, that's a global alias space. I don't have to hit space, but and then I go into here and I search git, I don't know, git log. It's like, oh, is there an alias for that? There's, I only use a certain percentage, very small percentage of them. A lot of them, like 99% of these I didn't write. I just brought in from various plugins. I only wrote the ones that I wanted an alias for or something like that. Like these, like Grom is the one I use a lot. Git reset hard origin master. And it could be origin master or it could be main because, a lot of people are saying, oh, we're not going to use the master branch because of political reasons. So now we're going to use the main branch. So then everybody's like, oh, we gotta be able to handle the main branch as opposed to master. So then everybody was writing shell functions to say, are they using master or are they using main? Is there master? Okay. Then we're going to use that branch. Is there no master? Oh, there's main. So now we're going to use that branch. So I wanted my alias to work with master or main, right? I want to reset to whatever it is. Is it the master branch or the main branch? I don't care which one it is. I just want you to reset hard to it.
The irony is that I just bought a brand new Mac, and as soon as I started to use Git, it defaulted to master. But if you're on GitHub, it defaults to main.
Yes.
So, yeah, they still haven't connected fully on which one they're going to use for the default.
And depending on
Yeah.
using
The
frameworks,
master.
they'll have their own, like sometimes will initialize the Git repo for you.
Yeah.
Sometimes will leave mains until the master.
Yeah, I personally I prefer main for no other reason than it's two less characters.
Is less character.
Yeah.
Yeah, Git init, it still creates master as the default branch, but see they're like, oh well, you could use main too, by the way.
And you can config that in your whatever your Git.
Yeah, right here. Git config, git
yeah.
config dash dash. Oh, I can demonstrate my Z shell completion. Git config dash dash global. Now I get completion here. I init. No, this one init template. See, in this case, it should tell me default branch. But see, the Z shell completion only says template dir is available. So in this case, it's outdated. So that's the thing about Z shell completions is as the command changes, the completions have to be updated. So there's the Z shell repository. They're always updating the completions because the commands are always changing. So in this case, so underscore get is part of the Z shell. So their completion is out of date. So it doesn't know about init dot default branch or whatever. So anyways, that's that is just a product of having completions that live separately than the commands. But you know, there are some commands. So like I think which com- completion. So kubectl, you can generate the completions from the command. So in this case, you would source the output of this in your shell. And a lot of plugins that you load in Z shell, they will source the output of the command's completion. So, and then that way your completion is automatically in sync with the command, which is nice. People understand that concept? Is that the completion functionality lives with the command. So then whenever the command changes, they'll update their completions too, rather than other people having to go and update the completions. But a lot of commands, they don't have this functionality. So then people write completions themselves, like Git. There's no way to generate completions in Git. So the Z shell plugin developers or the Z shell developers, there's a whole team of people on the Z shell, you know, behind Z shell. A lot of people, and they go in and they update, you know, they go and update all the completions. I forgot where Git is in here.
Have you looked at Warp?
What?
Have you looked at Warp, the Warp terminal emulator?
No.
So it's actually it's a Rust-based terminal editor, or sorry, not editor, but like emulator. But the main feature is that it's got AI baked into it. And so one of the things that I've been using it for the last couple of months, and one of the things I like about it is that it actually will use essentially large language model features to essentially do completions or auto-generate completions for you.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I know fish shell. The fish shell can it automatically parses the output of man to generate completions for you in a lot of cases if it can't find a default completion, which is pretty cool. But what's that terminal emulator called? Warped?
Warp, W-A-R-P, like Warp Drive or Project Warp.
Oh,
Have you used any other features in that terminal?
So they've got some cool features in there for specifically editing because they're targeting like a group of people that aren't just using the terminal but also are developers. And so if you are one of these people that you know tends to develop everything using either Vim or VM, and so you're always just kind of staying in the terminal, it's got an editor built into it. And they'll even go through and we'll use like some of the you know large language model features for doing code generation and suggesting code changes. And they're eating their own dog food because they've written the entire emulator in Rust. So all of the developers that are working on it are actually using it to develop Warp. So it's a kind of interesting project. There's a free tier, but it's very easy to exceed the LLM, I guess, token limits. But you can plug in your own, like if you're using OpenAI as an example, you can actually plug in your own API key and then use that instead.
Yeah, one thing is it's seems like it's taking control of some of my keystrokes that I'm used to
You
using.
can get out of that by hitting backspace. So
What?
there's a mode. So like for instance, like if you don't know what to type, for instance, if you're to type in, hey, can you give me a list of all the files in the current directory as an example? It's smart enough to go ls for that.
Yeah, I get you, but it's taking control of some of my keystrokes in a way that a regular terminal emulator is not. Like the space bar, I have special functionality in the space bar, and it's not. It's taking over. It, it's not running my space bar command, which is interesting. Yeah, so every terminal is different, you know. Terminal emulator, they can intercept keystrokes and do all these different configurations. So whatever terminal emulator you choose, you have to configure it towards your liking. So in this case, it's showing me my prompts, but then it's typing down here. I wonder if any of my custom key bindings, if they'll work here or not.
Something else that's nice about it is they have built-in support for MCP. So if you're using Model Context Protocol services, you can add that into the setup here. So it can grab that extra context. But the other thing is there's also, if you saw at the top, there's a sign up where you can sign in. So if you're using the same terminal on multiple machines, it will sync those settings up across multiple machines. It's not perfect because I was using it also on a Windows laptop up until about a week ago. And, on the Windows laptop, it's a completely different file system. And I was using PowerShell on the Windows system. But the nice thing about this is it runs on Mac OS, Linux, and Windows.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. But like I said, it's taking control of the tab key. It's doing its own thing on the tab key, tab and the space bar. So it's intercepting the keystrokes and doing its own thing, which is
Yeah.
fine. But if you have the tab key in your shell programmed to something else, now that functionality is lost because it's saying, "Oh, well, tab key, I know what to do with the tab key. I'm not going to send it to the shell because I'm doing something else with it." Which,
Another feature they have is they'll make suggestions. If you hit the right arrow key, it'll do the completion for you.
yeah. I have that in my terminal. It goes based off of your history. You know, that's a plugin the fish shell had that functionality first. They had that functionality to go based on your history. So you type something, it'll show you in gray characters, like, oh, based on your history, you wrote OBJ dump. So now you typed O, then the right arrow to get that back from your history.
Yeah.
And Z shell people said, oh, we should have that. So then they wrote plugins. People wrote plugins to do that. Like, I forgot what that plugin's called though. It's called
The nice thing about this feature is that it's using a predictive algorithm. So, for instance, if you type in git add file name of a file you just modified, you start typing the next command, it's smart enough to go, oh, you probably want to do a git commit -m, and then it even will suggest, a commit message
Yeah.
based on what you were just adding. So
Yeah.
That's the shell auto suggestions. I have that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the plugin. The Z Shell Auto Suggestions is the one where it adds based on your history. Like, oh, you just ran NeoVim, blah, 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 blah. So if you type an N, then you probably meant that, right?
So
So,
my only complaint with that one is that, say you type a command, say you type, I don't know, grep or something.
yeah.
Or something I do a lot is PS Ox, and pass
Yeah.
that grep. When I type a command, it will only show the last one that I ran. So if I'm checking for multiple processes that I'm running, I have to like do that and then undo the command and then type in the actual argument that I want. So then I think it'd be nice if you had a way to see the history of that command with the different arguments.
Yeah, you can. You can do. There's another plugin for that. It's called substring search. Z Shell history substring search. There's a
Okay.
yeah, that plugin. I forgot what it. Oh yeah. So you type the part that you're looking for, then you up arrow, and it will
Yeah.
show you
Yeah, that's my idea.
that substring.
Well, I'll check that out.
Yeah. I don't use that one that often, but like if I want to search for what was your example? PS aux grep what?
PS Ox, pick any kind of process. But like I'll do that with like multiple processes. And so like I need to change the argument of PS Ox. Or
Yeah.
actually the argument of that type into grep. So actually the grep argument.
I'll usually just, maybe I'm old school, but I just do like the reverse search Control R. You know?
Yeah. Yep. You can do that one. There's
Use your own like alias if you do PS Ox a lot.
there's
Yeah. Control R PA, and then you can search through the history.
That's true. Yeah. But if it's recent history, that's probably work.
That's true. Yeah.
there's another plugin called History Search Multi-Word, and I forgot. I don't, there's some key binding for it. I forgot. Forgot how I forgot how I searched through my key bindings. History. But yeah, the Control R one, that was like I think that's available on Bash. That's like an Emacs, basically like an Emacs derivative, like what do they call it? GNU readline. That's a GNU readline thing because Emacs, they that's an Emacs key binding, I believe.
I didn't know that.
I got Space Max, which is a Emacs type framework, and so it tries to do all this configuration. Yeah, Control R. That's a Control R searches in Emacs backwards. So that's where, and Control S searches forwards in Emacs. So, that read line, that Control R, that's a read line thing, because GNU. So Emacs was created by the guy who's behind GNU. What's that guy's name? Yeah, Stallman, Richard Stallman. So he created Emacs and GNU, and then he created readline, I believe. And then Bash uses readline for a bunch of key bindings if you're in the default mode. Because in Bash, you can change it to using VI mode instead of the Emacs mode. And then uses different key bindings. Because GNU readline, they have all this basic functionality that people get used to. But they don't realize, oh, that's just GNU readline, and GNU readline is available on a bunch of different platforms. It's not just Bash.
Best looking web page ever.
What?
I was joking that it was the best looking web page ever.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, Case Western. Yeah. They're no styling, just basic HTML. Default style.
Straight out of 1994.
Yeah. But the thing is with Bash is it's very primitive, and it's only maintained by this one guy, Chet Ramey. Like Z Shell has a whole team of people maintaining it, and Bash is just like one guy, one random guy who basically does no updates. He's just like one guy, and all he does is nothing. So like Bash just stays there. No, I'm kidding, but it doesn't really evolve much. Like Z Shell, they're always, updates, blah blah blah. So
Anybody know or remember when Apple switched from Bash to ZSH?
it was a few years ago. They did that, I believe, for licensing purposes.
Uh,
Yeah, but Z Shell was always available on Darwin, but then they switched over to Z Shell licensing purposes. I forgot what they did with the license. Oh, I think it was GPL. They changed it to GPL 3 or something, and then that means uh I forgot what all the things mean, but it was more restrictive, and so they're probably like, oh, we can't do that anymore. Blah, blah, blah. But yeah, so uh yeah, I mean, if you're trying to create advanced functionality, um it can be, hold on, let me turn on the light. If you're trying to do advanced functionality in a shell, it's difficult because you're trying to handle all these different operating systems. You're trying to handle all these different setups, all these different commands that are constantly changing all the time. And so you're basically in a battle because you're always trying to update things. And yeah, so, and like with my setup, my terminal thing, people are like, oh, I want to be able to run it on some random Linux distro, like blah blah blah, like make it work with this random Linux distro, and you know, just it's a lot of work because like every Linux distro is different as far as where everything is and blah blah blah, so it can be annoying. So yeah, so another advanced Unix terminal thing is tmux. So in a normal terminal emulator, well, I already talked about a little bit, but normal terminal emulator, you just have one window, right? And you do all your stuff in that one little terminal. And tmux allows you to have uh, you know, as many panes as you want, and you can have different windows down here. So you could have, in this case, I could have all this stuff running here in this window, I can go to a new window, do all this stuff over here, whatever, have some custom setup, have this one running, HTOP or whatever, and this one doing blah, blah, blah. It doesn't matter. Appliances or, okay, whatever. Painter top. Anyways, so you can do all this advanced setup in Tmux, and you can have all these custom setups. And what's really nice is I close my terminal emulator window and I lose nothing because all I have to do is reattach like this, Tmux attach, and now I'm back. So your everything's persistent. All of this is called a session. So in a session, you have multiple windows, and each window you have multiple panes. And you can do all this functionality, like I can send text from this pane to some other pane, or I can copy the contents of some pane. I could copy all this. I can scroll through the history of the pane. I can copy this to the clipboard. I can do all this stuff. And on top of that, with Tmux, you have status bars, so I can see all this status information, my upload and download, my CPU, memory, load averages, uptime, date, time, battery percentage, external IP, host name, blah, blah, blah. And so, people who want advanced setups, they go to Tmux because it allows you to do all this stuff. And
That's the power line you have Tmux or
yeah,
are you-
this is the power line status bar for Tmux. So Tmux has plugins like Zshell. Tmux has plugins. There's the Tmux plugin manager, TPM. And and so you can have various Tmux plugins that adds functionality. Like one functionality I have is I search the contents of the current pane or URLs and stuff like that. But yeah, the power line status is a library. It's a library for various programs, but one of them is Tmux. Power line status. It's a Python library. Here it is. So yeah, you install this and then you basically run this Python agent and it updates this, and you can configure it. So I think forgot. You have all my Tmux config in here. So with Tmux, what's this one? With Tmux, you can source config files. So you can have all this functionality. The Tmux has its own configuration stuff. And it has its own language, own commands and stuff like that. And so you can put scripts like, oh, I have one for 32 panes. So it's a script that splits your terminal into 32 panes. I forgot a Emacs source file. Two. Oh no. I'm trying to remember. I have all these key bindings. I don't remember them all. It says I don't use that 32 one much. basically ever. But anyways, Tmux, you can do all these different setups. I just used one of them. Basically, this this one here is the one I use the most. So you can have some custom setup and you split the panes based on percentages, and then you can run whatever command that you want in each of those panes. So like I have htop here, I've got network manager, iftop thing down here that shows you all your network connections and your upload and download, like the traffic that's getting sent. Then I have some log monitor, and then I've got some monitoring all the disks, seeing how much free space you have and stuff like that. And then a couple panes over here for random, interactions. I think I remember. A lot of the stuff I wrote just because I was experimenting, and I don't use a lot of it because it's I don't know, it's kind of extra stuff that was there, and I created it. Didn't really use it that much after I created it. It's not like you need all this stuff. It's not like you need 2,000 aliases. It's just it's the product of having all these plugins, and then you only use a few of them, and the other ones are just kind of you forget about. It's not like I need 14,000 Z show completions. It's just that maybe somebody else will use a few of them. That's it. So everyone's going to use different ones. So, but yeah, Tmux is amazing, and you can do status bars and all these different setups, and you can copy contents. So say you had one thing I used to do was this. I'd have four. I would have four. There we go. I would have four columns here, 4 panes, and each one would have a different config file. So I could do my zshell RC over here, my tmux config file, my vim RC, because I use vim. I'm a vim guy. I don't like Emacs really. And then some other random config. And then the idea was, well, I want to be able to copy and paste. So like if I'm in this Vim session, then I'm in this one. I want to be able to copy and paste between them. So actually now I use the Vim clipboard. So I'll select something that I want to copy, and then I'll send it to this system clipboard, and then I'm able to paste it somewhere else. So that's what I use now. Is I just use the system clipboard. I send it system clipboard and Vim. You could also use the Vim, or you could use the Tmux buffer. So in Tmux, you can go and make a selection and send that to the clipboard, and then you can paste it. The thing I don't like about that is that then you get the line numbers and all this crap. So I'm not a fan of using the Tmux clipboard necessarily because it doesn't understand. I don't want to copy line numbers and all these Vim marks here. I don't care about that. So, but yeah, I mean, the Tmux clipboard, Tmux also has buffers. So you can send random stuff in the buffers and then take it out of a buffer somewhere else. So like anything here, you can get into a buffer and send it somewhere else, inside of Tmux. You're only limited by your imagination as far as what you can do. But Tmux allows you to just basically control this whole thing, all your terminals, and just integrate them and stuff like that. So you couldn't do that without TMUX.
I've done this before, and it's doable with just them, but opening two in the same file and splitting them like that, and then that way,
Yeah.
long file, you can reference something at the top of the file while the
Yeah.
part is open.
Yeah, you could do that. You could open up two files in Vim and split it like that. You could also, Vim has tabs too, so you could open up different files and different tabs. Tab edit from file. But yeah, I mean there's a million ways to do things in the Unix world, just whatever you prefer. So yeah, I mean using TMUX is will open up a ton of different doors as far as what you can do in the terminal. And yeah, so I don't think you could, you wouldn't be able to do everything without TMUX. And what else? Another thing, another tool that has developed to be very popular is a program called FCF. And FCF is what I'm using here. So say I wanted to go to my most recent directories. So what I'm doing is there's a list of all of my most recent directories I've been in, and I send them into FCF, program called FCF. FCF. Fuzzy Finder. Written in Go. It's really amazing program. And you can filter. So it's FCF because it's a fuzzy filter. So you type whatever. It doesn't have to be contiguous letters. It can be. But it will fuzzy search. That's what fuzzy means, is it's non-contiguous. And it will filter out all this stuff here. And what's really cool about FCF is that you can have this preview window over on the right. So this is my most recently edited file. Sorry. So this is a list of my most recently edited files from Vim, basically. And so it shows me, so recent chronological order down. So the most recent file was vimrc, then this file, then this file, then this file. And I get a preview over here on the right, and it's a preview that's syntax highlighted. I'm using BAT is the program, BAT, to syntax highlight the file. And it's scrollable, which is pretty cool. And so yeah, the preview window is really cool in FCF. And then whenever I hit enter, it's going to run this command and put in the contents, whatever, not the contents, the file name that I selected here. And you can select multiple files. So you can see it out of 3,432 files. I can filter it down to 76 or whatever. And then I can add more files to my selection. So I have 41 files on my selection. And then when I hit enter, now all those files went into my command here. See that? So now I'm editing 42 files. Pretty cool. So yeah, and then from here, you could do Vim and split, like what you were talking about, splits, and stuff. And yeah, you can do a lot of different things in Vim. Vim is another tool that if you really learn how to use it, it can be very powerful. I mean, you can do completions, basic completions, nothing like an IP, but it can do completions, and you can have code snippets and things like that. And there's a lot of different Vim plugins out there. So, choosing your editor and becoming very proficient is extremely important if you want to be good in the terminal, because a lot of, terminal is all about text manipulation. So yeah, so FCF is amazing, and basically you just pipe in FCF. So say I took man ls. What the thing is, man is giving me all those escape stuff. I think he did yours. So you type pipe any output into FCF, and then you can fuzzy search through it to see, which is pretty cool. And then whatever you select, so it's based on the line, whatever you select by default just gets returned. So like I could capture this in a variable or whatever, something like that if I wanted to. But you could also just pipe it into like like that, and then wait, how do you get Vim to read from standard input? I thought it was, yeah. So in this case, I'm telling Vim to read from standard input. So whatever gets returned from FCF will get sent into Vim. See, it's pretty cool. So anyways, yeah, FCF, it's very, Unix has the concept of terminal pipelines, right? Everything's based on these pipelines. It's all text going from one command to another command, right? It's a chain. And so in this case, I'm saying take the man page ls, send it into call-b to remove all these escape things, then send it into FCF, and then send it into Vim. Not NeoVim, I'll just do regular Vim. So, and Vim will take whatever FCF returns and put it into this buffer, that I could turn into a file if I wanted to. Save it to a file if I wanted to. So, yeah, FCF is a very important tool. It has become tons of people are using FCF. Tons nowadays.
For NeoVim, that combines this.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
So yeah. So like a lot of Vim. So the author of FCF, he uses Vim a lot. He's a Vim guy. So he wrote a Vim plugin called, FCF.vim. And so you can do all this FCF stuff inside of Vim, which is amazing. So let's open up Vim, and then it can be like files, and then it will search, fuzzy search all these different files. This is in my home directory, I believe, because it's by default based in your present working directory. Yeah.
It's amazing for navigating like trees of
Yeah.
folders. Like you said, if you know roughly what folder you're looking for, you just start typing the name of it.
Yeah. You can also do colors. You can fuzzy search to their color schemes in Vim. That's pretty cool. Yeah, there's all these, oh my gosh, there's so many different things you can do with FCF inside of Vim. You can fuzzy search through your lines in the buffer. So you fuzzy search through the contents, and then you hit enter and you get moved to that line. That's pretty cool. Man, there's so much you can do. You can fuzzy search through all your key bindings in Vim, which is pretty cool. So yeah, there's a ton of stuff you can do, and some of this functionality is so good that IDEs don't even have that functionality. There's a lot of things that you can do in Vim, like once you customize it, there's no other IDE. There's no IDE out there that actually has that functionality. So yeah, it's all, it's how deep you want to go into it and how much I do use Vim very heavily. If it's like if I'm doing JavaScript or whatever, I'm going to use IntelliJ or WebStorm, whatever. But if I'm doing like my git config or some config file, I'm going to use Vim because the IDE has no benefit for me versus Vim. If it's just text editing, I'm going to use Vim basically because the IDE has no advantage. In fact, it's worse. But if it's like coding where I need advanced code insight, then I'll use the IDE because uh, Vim has the concept of tags, which is basically where you scan your code base and then Vim will build up a tag cache or whatever. And then in your code definition, like you can go, oh, I want to jump to the definition or declaration of whatever. And then Vim will like, oh yeah, that's in my tag database. Here it is. Stuff like that. You know, so that's pretty cool. Like you can do that and get into that. And I tried to do that, but I gave up because I didn't think it was as good as using a full-blown IDE. So but yeah, for basic text editing like config files, I use Vim 100%. There's no way I would open up my Z shell RC inside of some IDE. Never. I would never do that. Or my Vim RC, I would never open that up in Visual Studio Code. That doesn't make any sense to me at all. I don't use Visual Studio Code, but I would never open up any config file in some JetBrains IDE. It doesn't make sense because Vim actually has better understanding of that stuff anyway, based on the syntax. So it will give you better syntax highlighting in Vim than it would in IntelliJ because IntelliJ doesn't know crap about a Vim RC file. It's like, what the heck is that? Or something like that. It'd be like, I don't know what that is. It's just going to be all the same color because I don't know what this is. Whereas Vim would be like, oh yeah, I know what all the keywords are. Blah, blah, blah. So in Vim, you set the file type and do whatever. And from there, Vim knows, okay, the file type is this. So then I'm going to do all this syntax highlighting. And Vim has a much greater list of things that it recognizes than like 90, most IDEs. So anyways, that's why I still continue to use Vim. Emacs is similar, but I don't know. I don't like the Emacs key bindings, and I try to use Spacemacs and other things, but I don't know. It just didn't really click with me for whatever reason. Yeah, so yeah, I mean the things that I listed are enough, TMUX, Z shell, FCF, Alacrity. If you get really good at those things, completions, aliases, all of that stuff, get all of that going, then basically be very advanced in the terminal, very good, and you can do a ton of stuff. Quickly. Like I said, I have this thing called ZM where I list. So there's a Z command and it lists your most frequently and recent directories. And then I say ZM, and then I put in some name like git, and then it will search my Z database. That's what Z is. Z is a command that searches like your directory database, and it moves you there. So you type Z and then some blah 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 search term, and then it will search through all your directories. But anyways, I do ZM. That just means Z, and I want to I want to reset to main or master, and then I put in some name, like usually I say work/git. So I just say ZM Git, and it will CD to my Git directory where I have all my work stuff, and loop through all the directories and pull down, git fetch all and get reset hard or get reset hard to origin master. That way I don't have to uh, think about if I'm out of date before starting, work. So anyways, things like that saves me a lot of time because I just run that and then I'm all up to date. And if I've got like 50 different repos cloned down or whatever, I've worked on projects there were hundreds of microservices, different repos. I don't want to be running git pull and all of those. It sucks. So anyways, there's a lot of different things that and you just figure out what's valuable for you. Like I use this one a lot. Just reset everything that I have I don't care about, and it is. So you just create your own aliases. PK just means back. That's just something I did because I just want to get back to where I was. That's all everything like that. Just certain things like GTL, get tag list. Just list me all the tags, versions, things like that. You just create your own little customizations and nobody else really has to understand them or use them. But if it works for you, it works, then it's worthwhile. Not like, it's not like anybody else has to use this configuration or anything like that. So
Cool. Well, thank you so much for talking about all that stuff. Did anyone have any questions? Last questions?
No, I learned a lot.
Yeah?
That was super, super helpful.
yeah. I mean, there's you can get really deep into it, and a lot of these things, like I said, I don't, I was like, I don't remember what my key bindings were. And that's always what happens. You only use a certain small percentage, and you don't need to use all this other stuff. So I would just say if you learn some of those tools I mentioned, you get really good at them, that'll be enough to really enhance your capabilities. That's all you need. So
For sure.
just pick one of those things and learn more about it, and then, incorporate it in your daily work. So,
Sounds good.
Awesome. Thanks, Jacob.
no problem.
Thanks.
Thank you.